Welcome back to the Build a Full SwiftData app course. This is lesson 2, and today we will cover adding an empty state to the app ideas list. We will also be able to delete app ideas and app features. We will be adding some haptic engine SensoryFeedback, and we will be improving our query by adding a filter and a sorting method. So let's get right into it. First of all, I want to talk to you about an issue that is currently going on with SwiftData in the beta cycle of Xcode 15. So I'm using Xcode 15 beta 1, which you can see right here. The build number is this thing right here. This is the first beta version, so I am running into issues with deleting objects from SwiftData, and I will show you that in just a second, but then I will turn that bug into a feature, and we will implement archiving app ideas instead, which arguably makes a lot more sense anyways. So we have a list of our app ideas in here in our content view, and the list row is basically a navigation link. So to that navigation link, we could now attach a modifier to get rid of it. So to make things a bit easier, I will actually grab that navigation link and turn it into a new subview. So let's Command X that to get it out of there. And let's create a new SwiftUI view, and I will call it App Ideas List Row. Let's create that. And in the body parameter here, let's pass back our navigation link. And then, of course, we will have to have a var idea, which is an app idea. And just like that, we already have, let's get rid of the preview, we're not using it anyways. Just like that, we already have factored out the app ideas list row. And then we can just use that in our list instead, and also get rid of the idea in here. We can just use the $0 syntax to pass it into the list row. And running this in a simulator, it will look basically exactly the same as it did before. So we still have our list of ideas. I added some ideas here to test. And everything behaves exactly the same. We can still click on them and so on, everything exactly the same. So now inside of this list row, let's implement a swipe action to delete one of these app ideas. And we will be implementing this, but I can already tell you it won't be working. So in the swipe action, let's add a button. And I always like to use a button with a role if I have a destructive or a cancel button, just so the system knows what this button is and can perhaps do some changes to how it's laid out or designed. So I will actually not be using this initializer. I will be adding a label manually because I actually want a SwiftUI label saying delete, and I will be using the trash symbol. And then in here, we can actually delete the app idea, which we can do by using the model context from the SwiftUI environment. And in there, we can just say model context dot delete the idea. And that should be everything that we need to do. So let's try and run that in the simulator. And now, for example, for this last test idea here, we have a swipe action to delete. And if I press on it, it actually gets deleted. Okay, interesting. This did crash in my testing, so let's run that again and see if it still works. Okay, it looks like it does still work. So let's test it with the other one, perhaps add some features here. So let's just say feature 1. And now we can try deleting that as well. And it also works. Very interesting. I expected this to crash. What I also tried in my testing was deleting via a confirmation dialog. So I don't want users to directly delete via a swipe action. I actually want them to have a confirmation dialog to confirm that. With a confirmation dialog, it did crash for me every single time I tried. So you can either leave this functionality via a swipe action in there, or how I want to implement it next is adding an archived attribute to our app idea to be able to actually just archive the app ideas instead of plain out deleting them. That way we can also have access to archived app ideas later on if we do decide that it might have been a good idea in the long run. So to do that, let's go to app idea and let's create a new field here, and I will say is archived. That will be a boolean, and I want this to be false by default, but actually we can just copy that over here into the initializer, and then we can also say self.isArchived is archived. This way, for all of the old values, they will not be archived. They will be set to false for all of the old app ideas that we have already added to the app, and for future app ideas, they will also be false, and then we can play around with that. So in our button here, instead of saying delete and using the trash symbol, we will be saying archive, and I think it is called archive box. We will see in just a second. And then in here in the button action, we can just say app_idea.isArchived is true. Now let's run that in the simulator real quick just to see how it looks. So we still have our app ideas, and let me add a dummy idea here as well with some random description. And now we have our swipe action here with the archive box. All right, so that looks good. And now pressing that will not do anything. We don't have the animation because we're not deleting it actually. It's still part of the list. So next, let's update our list query to only show those app ideas that are not archived. So in our content view, let's change up the query here, and we will be adding a filter, a sort, and an order, but we won't be adding an animation, so we can get rid of that part. So for the filter, there is a new Swift macro that we can use, which is very handy, and it's just hash predicate, and then a trailing closure, and in here we basically get an app idea in, and we can now have just a boolean in here that we have to return that tells us whether we should show that app idea or not. So I will say app idea.isArchived is false, so we only want to show those ideas that are not archived, and in fact we can get rid of these two parts and just use the $0 syntax again. Let's also move the filter to its own line. Let's move the sort to its own line and make sure this is properly indented. We want to sort the app ideas by \creation date, which is also a property that we added to our app idea class, and we want the sort order to be backwards. So also move that to its own line, and once again right here. Looks like it's not backwards, it's actually reverse for sorting order. So let's give that a run, and now you will see that our dummy idea 2, which we just created a second ago, is not part of the list anymore because it is in fact archived, which means that the predicate will be false for that app idea and it will not be part of our query. Now let's also implement a delete functionality for our app features. So we will go into Edit App Idea View, and for each of these features, let's attach a context menu. So we can long press and hold to open up a context menu to delete these features. So in here, we will just be adding a button, and I will just use the same initializer that we used beforehand in our swipe action. So I will say this is destructive, and I will also manually add a label, which will once again be a label, and the title key will be delete, and the system image will be trash. Now getting rid of this app feature here works a bit differently because it is part of idea.features. So we will say idea.features.remove all where, and now here we can pass in a condition. So let's have a look at how our app feature looks. So we do have a unique attribute, so why not use that to build our predicate here. So I will just say $0.detail description is the same as our feature.detail description. Let me also try out if these things are actually equatable. So then we could say $0 equals feature. Let's see if that works. And it seems to work. All right, so that's great. So now we've gotten rid of the feature in our ideas feature list, and now we can also get rid of it through the model context. So model context.delete this feature, and for that, of course, we need to actually grab the model context from the SwiftUI environment. Let's give that a run as well. So in our workout tracker, let's add a new feature, and then we can long press on that to bring up the context menu. You will notice that the delete button is red, which is because we gave it a role of destructive. This is precisely why I like to use these button roles in SwiftUI nowadays. And now if I press delete, it will be gone and everything works as expected. It's gone for good. I want to do two more things in this lesson. So first of all, I want to add a ContentUnavailableView to show an empty state when we have no app ideas. And then I also want to add some SensoryFeedback to archiving app ideas. So for the SensoryFeedback, it's actually super easy as of iOS 17. It's just a single view modifier that we need now. So we will go into our app idea list row, which represents one of these app ideas in our list. So we have our swipe action to delete here. We can also add the .SensoryFeedback modifier. For the feedback, I will just say perhaps decrease. And for the trigger, we will pass in an equatable value, which in our case, we want this SensoryFeedback to be triggered when our idea.isArchived changes, which only changes when it's being set to true, so when the idea is archived, which is precisely what we want. Now, I'm not able to test this view modifier right now because I don't have iOS 17 running on an actual physical device, and it obviously doesn't work in the simulator. But if you have iOS 17 installed, I'd appreciate it if you could leave a comment if the SensoryFeedback modifier actually works in beta 1. And then for the last part, let's go into our content view and let's grab this list here and wrap it in a group. That way we can keep all of these view modifiers, and we can now add some condition to say if ideas.isEmpty, then we want to show something, and only if we have app ideas we want to show this list. So if the ideas are empty, we can use a brand new view in iOS 17, which is called ContentUnavailableView. And we will be using this initializer with a title, and we can say no app ideas as the title. As the system image, let me have a look what I used before. So I think I used this one here. Let's also realign these. And then make sure that the description is not a string, it's actually a SwiftUI text. And in here we can, for example, say, or tab add to create your first app idea. And now if we run that, we will not be noticing any difference because our list is not empty. So for debugging, I would just say equals false here in our condition. And this is how it will look like when there are no app ideas in the app. So it will have the SF symbol that we specified, title that we specified, and description that we specified. Alright, so you have reached end of lesson 2 for the Build a Full SwiftData App course. In lesson 3, we will be migrating our SwiftData aspects to app groups so we can share them with app intents and a widget extension. And we will also be adding our first app intent so we can create an interactive widget in the next lesson. This is just a quick reminder that if you want to actually track your app ideas with a more sophisticated application than the thing that we're building right now, I would highly recommend you to try out LaunchBuddy. It's completely free. It's made by me. It's a project management tool made specifically for indie developers to keep track of your app ideas, your app's future updates, your releases, and all of the tasks that you have going on. You can try out LaunchBuddy with the link in the video description or the pinned comment, or just search for LaunchBuddy in the iPhone or Mac App Store.